Study session on August 18th, 2026. This is a study session, so no decisions can be made here. This is really an information gathering, sharing time for us. We have two agenda items tonight. The first one is an update on the St. Vrain Valley School District's crossing guard program and changes that have come up and certainly has gotten the attention of us and our residents. And then after that, we're going to try to time box that to about 20 minutes. And then after that, we've got our first 2027 budget study session. All right, with that, I think I'd like to introduce you, Jackie. Yeah, so Dr. Kabushin, Superintendent of St. Vrain Schools.
Yep.
All right, we'll call you Jackie. Appreciate you being here tonight and just helping us and our public understand, the change.
Great.
And then we've got our police chief here today to talk about a little bit of the history.
Thank
and
you.
The goal is to kind of figure out where do we go from here.
Yeah, and that would be really helpful
Yeah.
to kind of understand all of the history. Some of us are new in our positions and we're just trying to figure this out, not just for Erie, but for multiple municipalities. We approach crossing guards different in every town that we serve. Some fully take on the crossing guard program, like the city of Longmont, and they hire, they train, we split the costs with them, and they essentially offer that service for St. Vrain. And for good reason, there are some roads in that area that we would have no business putting people on. In Meade, they do the same thing. Frederick also does the same thing, although it's kind of flipped, where we do the hiring and the training and they support it with costs. Firestone in 2022 let the crossing guard program go completely. For them, there was no return on investment, and they very much had a lot of difficulty in hiring people. And what has become apparent to us through all of these conversations is that we likely have a better shot at getting people hired for crossing guards because we can add working in the school to somebody's responsibilities, and they can be employed at least part-time or full-time, as opposed to 1 or 2 hours a day. And that's why some of the towns have such a difficult time hiring, is because it's really a half hour in the morning or 45 minutes and a half hour in the afternoon, and no one wants to blow their entire day waiting for those 2 half hours. They're certainly not going to get rich doing that duty. And the other thing that we have been watching and that we've become aware of is that those duties are not easy. Our world has gotten a little more angry in the last 20 years. Our towns are growing, especially those kind of on the outskirts of our district. Traffic is becoming more and more congested. And in addition to student safety, I also have to think about staff safety as well. And some of those crossing guards get abused on a daily basis. And so it's not a job that's easy for them. In weather, they have to be out there. They have to be out there in the dark when the time changes. And sometimes it's even difficult having our employees agree to do those responsibilities. I also have concerns that the scope of crossing guards has increased over the years. So now, instead of crossing kids right across from the school, we've started taking on roads that are sometimes 4 or 5 blocks away from the school. For example, in Firestone, we cross kids on Sable, we cross them on Birch, which runs parallel to Colorado Boulevard, and I believe at one time we did have crossing guards on Colorado Boulevard as well, which would have put some of our crossing guards 4 blocks away from the school. So we're likely going to eliminate that completely.
Does that impact Erie at all? Do we have situations like that?
I believe most of our crossing guards, I brought maps of where all of them are, and I haven't taken a look at these since they were handed to me. I believe most of our crossing guards now are close to the school. The only one that is further from the school is Lafayette or Erie Elementary at the corner by the gas station. It's a 4-way stop. And because it is still close to our middle school and we can still support and monitor the crossing guards out there, we're going to keep one there. But it's not in line of sight of the school at this time. So that's also part of our challenge, is monitoring our crossing guards, making sure that if there is an accident or something happens, that we're able to get to them quickly and get them support, and we're not leaving them kind of standing there by themselves. And also monitoring for consistency, because any crosswalk is better. It's better to communicate to families that it is unmanned than to have it be inconsistently manned. And so that's part of our supervision when we take on the crossing guard piece, is to make sure that if an employee is absent, that we have somebody who can fill in, and that we never leave those crosswalks uncovered when we've told families that they will be there. So that's kind of what we're working through. A lot of our MOUs have expired that give us the authority to stop traffic, legally give us the authority to stop traffic. We don't believe we actually have, and we feel like we can fix this, but even the training that Safe Routes to Schools provides says that it must be provided by somebody who has gone through a train the trainers, or by law enforcement. The training has to be done. So we'll have to work through some of that as well to make sure, because if something happens, that'll be the first question. Were your people trained, and were they trained appropriately? And then the last thing that I will say is we are very concerned about County Road 5. We're going to open an elementary school right off of County Road 5 in a year from now. And so we'll have the high school, we'll have Soaring Heights. The high school started a class of 500 kids today, freshman students. So, but for the new high school that will open in 28, that high school would be 2,000 students in the next 3 years if we continue that trend. Soaring Heights has over 1,000 students as well, and Collier's likely will open with about 400 students. So we're going to saturate that area with traffic, and I think we're going to need a longer term solution than a crossing light and a crossing guard. And that is our interest in working with you all in the next year to figure out what we can do with County Road 5.
Yeah, I think we all recognize the traffic on there.
Yeah.
Before we come back to that, so what changed from last year to this year? And then I heard that there were crossing guards out there.
There were. We
Yeah.
sent a letter yesterday,
yeah,
and
so-
we went ahead and we told them that we were now working with the town to get an MOU in place.
Okay.
So what changed is that Meade and Longmont notified us last spring that they were going to also pull out of the crossing guard programs, which would have put, in Longmont would be very, very big for us to pick up by ourselves. And at that point, after we started to review some of the legalities, we were worried about that, and we can't do for one community what we're not willing to do for all of the communities. So that was the first piece. The second piece is we had an accident on Francis Street late last spring, in which 2 students went around a crossing guard and were struck by a car. They ended up being fine. But that is what was the catalyst for causing us to kind of, those 2 things for reviewing the whole thing. And trying to decide whether this is something that we can continue to navigate on our own. And then I think we got ourselves into a space where we decided maybe pedestrian safety is not our responsibility. And maybe we do need to put some pressure on the municipalities to join us and to partner with us in some of this. And likely we will acknowledge that the timing of that was not good. We were working over the summer to negotiate with some of the jurisdictions, and in the end, until we said we're sending a letter, they were not willing to come to the table with us. We also had a transition in our Director of Safety and Security. At the end of June, he was doing a lot of the communication and the work, and then we transitioned to a new person. So
All right, so there's a lot of pieces that brought us to this.
Yeah.
I know when we were talking yesterday, we were talking about the timing, so I just want to say thank you for shifting and at least continuing on what you were doing last year until we have a chance
Yeah,
to.
but we do need to get that MOU or some kind of written agreement in place quickly, from our standpoint, and Tim can speak more to that. Just feeling like we've got to formalize it.
All right, and my understanding is that Brina, there you are. You and Tim, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name's Tim O'Neill. I'm general counsel for the school district, and I've been there for about 5 years. But historically, we've always worked with towns and the other jurisdictions because, there's a statutory subsection that's really specific to stopping traffic for school crossing guards, and it's kind of a strange little piece in Title 42. But really, the ability to do that requires a local authority that has least regulatory power, which a school district doesn't have, especially on a public road. So that's why we've always worked with the jurisdictions that we serve to kind of come up with it. Usually we'd offload the training and the hiring of those people that are going to be stopping traffic. And then we would compensate them, 50% or some percentage of their overall cost. Unfortunately, Erie was the first jurisdiction that stopped that program. And I think at the time in 2018, the school district just went forward and continued to provide that service because we knew, student safety is our primary concern. However, sometimes no good deed goes unpunished, right? I mean, then we had Firestone cancel their program in 2021. We had tried to unify, kind of come up with one formal MOU for all of the jurisdictions we serve. And we found ourselves in 2021, 22, kind of looking at providing these crossing guards without MOUs in place with Firestone and Erie. So I think, what we'd like to do, and I know that kind of in our conversation the other day, I know that this community feels very strongly about having crossing guards and ensuring the safety of students going to school, and that's commendable, and we're in the same place. So I think it's just a matter of trying to come into some understanding of how we're going to do that jointly, because we do believe that this is a public safety problem and not specifically a school district problem, because we're talking about kids on their way to our building. Once they're in our buildings, we understand that the obligations that we have to keep them safe, and we certainly want to work with you guys to make sure that they get there safely in any way we can. So I think kind of in the short term, we were even thinking something as simple as a letter agreement acknowledging that we're going to have these crossing guards out there, and that we are going to be responsible for making sure that they're doing that work until we get a formal more robust agreement in place with the town. It might be the best way to go, because we have to make sure that these kids can get to school safely, and I know that you guys would agree with that as well.
Yeah, so I think it's probably best that Brina and you, outside of us elected officials, work all of that. And, hopefully if we have to approve it, we can get it on agenda. If we don't have to approve it, then I think we're okay. Chief, you probably have a little history, I'm guessing, on the.
Probably too much, Mayor. Too much history.
Well, you don't have to share everything.
Yeah, I won't share
only
everything.
appropriate things.
Yeah, I just want to start out, first of all, saying that we've always had a great partnership with St. Clair Valley Schools, and we love working with them. We want to work with them. We certainly didn't mean to put them in a position where, it affected their entire district with our crossing guard stuff. We did used to run the program. Your synopsis of where all the municipalities are with their crossing guard program, I think Erie's been every single one of those at some point. We were originally hiring and managing the crossing guard program, but then as it expanded, we didn't have as we got more schools in town, we didn't have the resources to do that. And then, like you said, when the crossing guard wasn't there, we were signing a police officer, which works when you're small and your officers aren't getting a lot of calls, but then officers started to get called away. We'd have traffic accidents, and then you've got somebody there and the crosswalk is not manned. So the decision was made, like you said, back in 2018 to basically pull out of that program but provide training, and I think we did that for a short period of time, and then they put out that online training through CDOT, and I don't know what the conversation was at the time, it wasn't the chief at the time, but at some point we said, well, here's the training, and you guys took over the training. I will say that, we certainly are willing to work with you in any way possible. I agree with you, we want to get them to school safe as well and get them there. I just don't know if we're in a position still to have the resources to do the hiring and managing of the program as the police department.
Well, we appreciate the visibility that your police officers have had in school zones. Another piece that we would like to be considered is if we do have repeat offenders, that we're able to turn that information over to you and issue letters of warning. Because as we know, no process is really effective without some kind of teeth behind it to let people know we're serious about things, and that word spreads quickly. You issue one ticket or one letter of warning and then it goes. And sometimes our crossing guards do feel like they're kind of in this alone trying to
Absolutely.
navigate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we already have something like that where residents can give us a license plate of a particular traffic complaint or something, and we will run that plate, get the registered owner, and send them a letter saying, hey, your vehicle was observed doing this violation allegedly. Please drive safely. That kind of thing comes from the chief, and it is very effective. And we can certainly do that. Maybe we can arrange a meeting with the SROs and the crossing guard. Is each school managed? Like, is the crossing guard managed at each school, or is there
Yes.
somebody that, okay, so they'd have to contact the schools and say, hey, here's my information.
Yeah.
Give it to your crossing guard, please have them call me if you
Yes.
have a specific complaint.
Or if you send it to us, we can distribute that through, we have an area assistant soup who supervises all of the Erie schools. And
Perfect,
she can give the same message to every
Okay.
school.
that would be great. We will do that,
Thank you.
you bet.
All right, and I know we're almost out of time here. I had two other topics related to this. I know all of us have to also understand what Boulder Valley School District is doing, because we also have to have equity across our community. And then the crossing at Road 5, so Jackie and I were talking about the fact that Road 5 is busy. And westerly and northwesterly, I think there's an underpass that we have approved, once that gets developed. And the question is there an overpass, underpass, or something eventually on Road 5? It sounded like, Jackie, you were willing to partner,
Yes.
even in cost, if we went down that path. I know that Luke has had conversations with maybe a joint aquatic center at some point in the future. And so obviously we're not going to solve any of that here today, but perhaps with all the discussions with that, we can come up with a joint agreement.
Yep, that would be great.
All right. Any last comments?
I do wonder, I'm hearing a lot of resource problems. We don't have enough money to cover everything. So my daughters went to school in Superior, BBSD, and we had schools and we had a really robust volunteer force who ran the lollipop ladies. Stop signs look like lollipops. And you did not have to be a lady to be a lollipop lady. But I think that we still had training, and no one's more invested in getting kids safely to school than their parents. I'm wondering if that has been explored, if that's an option in our area, and then
So,
maybe to be able to reinforce those intersections that are more precarious.
yeah, so we are talking about that in-house, where we would begin a volunteer crossing guard program with training and with support for those roads or intersections that are further away from the schools. So as families approach us or parents approach us and say, really, you need a crossing guard on Erie Parkway or, by Red Hawk, where the light is there, I would say if you can come up with a number of crossing guards, we will train them and get them the equipment that they need and tell them, kind of the specifics and how they would be supported. It is, volunteers are fine as long as they're consistent. And therein lies the issue with volunteers. I love volunteers for lots of things. Safety and security isn't always my favorite for volunteers. If we have enough volunteers where we could have backup people who could be slotted in when somebody's child is sick or they're out of town, it would work just fine. But we have to have enough people who can really step up and man that one location. and that we can ensure consistency. Really, our liability is if we say there's somebody out there and then there's not, and we don't communicate with families that morning to let them know or that afternoon. So.
All right, this I think would be a good part of the conversation as it progresses for the long-term solution. Yeah. Appreciate you coming in, and
Thank you.
I know you're a busy person,
Yep.
so we appreciate you being here.
Thank you, appreciate it, thank you.
All right, we will move on to our second item, which is the 2027 budget study session, forecast and assumptions.
So Mayor, while Cassie and Sarah are getting ready out, I think you all have prepared yourself for this. This really is a very high level look at what to expect for next year. We started budget discussions in May, went through a number of rounds and got to where we kind of have an idea what we're looking at for next year, but Sarah has more details on that. I do want to thank Sarah and Cassie for all the work that they have put in, which has been many, many hours. But I also want to thank all the directors and the executive budget team who've spent more time looking at graphs and charts and numbers of the positive, negative, red and green and all kinds of colors to get us to where we are today. It's been a lot of work and we're only halfway there.
Yeah, no, thank you. Sarah Sands, Director of Finance, Cassie Bethune, our Budget and Fiscal Manager. Yes, so as Meredith mentioned, tonight we're going to go through some of our highest level information with the idea that, you know, we begin the conversation of making sure we're on the right track, that all these conversations are leading us in the right direction. And then from there, we'll come back to you in early October with a lot more detail on the budget, including all the directors who are here today to answer any high-level questions you have about their budgets. But we'll dig in a little bit further, show you what they've budgeted, what they haven't been able to budget, or what they've added. And then we'll really get into the nitty-gritty of making decisions. So with that, I'm on two different screens here, so let me, I think if I click, did you already pull this up for me?
Down at the bottom in the PDF.
Haha, right there,
No, the PDF, not the timeline.
PDF, got it, okay, cool, we're here. All right, let me figure out how to drive here and we'll be on the road. Okay, so tonight we're going to go through a lot of historical information. This is mirrored very similarly to what you saw last year. So we tried to keep continuity with the information on our historicals. Just so that you're aware, I remember last year we had School of Leeds, Lead School of Business here to kind of talk through. We have continued to utilize the resources as a part of our economic forecasting. So a lot of the numbers you'll see are either from the business or the Bureau of Labor Statistics or from the business school. So that's kind of what we're using as our frame of reference in terms of the economy. So then you'll see like very similar graphs. We'll go through our long-term financial strategy. We'll talk through our assumptions this year and kind of what we're seeing in our revenue projections. We'll talk a little bit about capital. We'll talk through debt because as you know, we have some different options this year in terms of sales tax coming up on the ballot. We'll talk about how we're balancing the budget this year, and then we'll ask for a little bit of feedback. And that feedback is going to relate to three primary areas. Are we on the right track? So are there priorities or projects that we're missing from the big picture that we need to make sure are included as we continue our balancing strategies? Is there support for the recommended revenue and expenditure assumptions that we're making and how we're forecasting? And then if there's any concerns on any trade-offs or any proposed fees that we're planning on bringing forward. So with that, I'm going to have Cassie dig into all the good stuff with our fun graphs.
So starting off, I'm going to go over a few of the historical trends to provide some context for what's feeding our assumptions and how we move forward. So with this graph, you can see that Erie's really benefited over the last decade from high growth, both in revenue and in population. It's been growing on both sides. You can see with that darker line that goes across there, that's the inflation adjusted line, that we are seeing a decrease even in the actual numbers, but more so with the adjusted numbers because our purchasing power has decreased, but the revenue is slightly decreasing from 24 to 25.
I'm sorry, I'm still. There we go.
All right, so diving into our biggest revenue for the general fund is sales tax. So you can see just like with the revenues overall, we've had very strong growth over the last decade, really benefit from strong growth that started to kind of level out there in 24-25, though as you see, as we go into the next slide, the reality of that is that it's actually leveling off more now.
Yes, and before we leave this graph, I do want to point out too that as we activate URA areas, that's what you're seeing on that green at the bottom. So that's where our revenue sharing kind of comes into play, right? So the URAs are getting portions of that to activate those areas. So that's just to kind of demonstrate how it's getting more diverse in terms of where we're allocating our sales tax. So, sorry, I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this without, there we go.
All right, so these are sales tax trends with the year-to-date numbers, so basically for the first half of each of the years listed there. And so you can see we had really strong growth that then was leveling off closer to 10%, and then this year we're about 2% for year-to-date. And so while revenues have not decreased by any means, we have definitely seen the growth come down to a more normalized level, and so we are making adjustments to fit that.
Yes, and I think one thing that, oh, my computer's loud, so let me turn that off. I think one thing that's important to note here too is that, as we're seeing those levels come down, I mean, we're not negative yet, but we are closer to COVID levels than we are at our peak levels. So, I mean, that just means a compression generally too in what we have available to spend. So, it's not alarming yet, but it's flat. All right, there we go.
And so along with the revenue growth, population growth has then increased services, increased operations for everything that we're putting out there, and that comes with increased expenditures. So just like how you see that line moving with the population growth, we've also had expenditures go along with that as we've added new programs, expanded services, and tried to keep up with maintaining service levels as well. And with that also comes staff. And so as we've expanded services and added more out there, we have had to add staff to keep up with the competing demands of the community as it grows. And so you can see there where we were actually below the total population growth at the very beginning of the decade, that's shown there. And then we've kind of stayed in line right with that number since it crossed over in the early years.
Something I'll add too in terms of what we're considering this year in terms of staffing, because we have grown so much with staffing over the last few years. We did receive position requests this year, but we're evaluating them very carefully and trying to stay somewhere where we're in a maintaining service levels or addressing deficient service levels. So we don't expect a lot of FTE adds this year. We do expect it to be pretty minimal. So just be aware of that there aren't big plans this year to add significant staff to the budget.
Does that include the police department as well?
So the police department has submitted position requests and we would consider that a core service area. So that one is still under consideration.
Okay.
All right, so in terms of our long-term strategy and forecast, we've maintained the same strategy that we did last year. We've been trying to keep continuity in how we approach this, and especially because we use our executive budget team, which includes the town management office, several department directors, folks from risk and HR who help support the budget team in terms of guiding the path in the budget each year. So what we use as our guiding light are the council priorities that have been put forward to us. We look at all of these trends for revenue and expenditures. We look at the emerging community needs, things that come up like tonight where there's a possibility of needing to help support something that has emerged in the middle of the year. Our long-term debt needs, which we make sure to earmark and have in place, and some statutorily required because of GO bond issuances. We look at our staffing growth, and then we look at areas that have to be deprioritized or we've moved away from in order to fund other areas. And then, of course, capital planning is a core area and a very costly component of our budget. So I will note, these are not real numbers. I have a little disclaimer down there, but what I want to demonstrate with this for you is when we're looking at our forecast assumptions, there's some pretty key areas we focus on. So we look at the revenues where we think our debt obligations, because we have to pay those. Those debt obligations do not just include the GO debt, but COPs. Even though those are not considered a debt obligation under TABOR, we as a town take the position that they are a debt obligation and budget them as such. We look at our operating budget, of course, and trying to understand how much that is inflating, costing us. And then we also look at the capital transfer and try to understand based on how we budget capital, which at this point is what is available before reserves, but after we've budgeted our basic operating, what is available for us to transfer to the capital fund. And so we look at that and we don't just look at 2027, we try to balance out through 2, 3, 4, and 5 years. In the past, we've budgeted to 5 years fully balanced. This year, we're going to talk about what we think that needs to look like moving forward. But this is generally our focus areas at this point in the budget process. So some economic factors that are really critical. I couldn't help but share this graph because I think it's pretty telling in terms of what residents are facing. The economy does stay resilient. What we found is that in the asset areas where people have money tied up in the stock market, investments in large banks, and areas with less liquidity, we're seeing a great boom in the economy. The economy is still doing very well. In areas where people need to utilize cash, which represents about 85% of the population, we're seeing compression. So we're seeing some consumer confidence coming down, and some of that has to do with some direct correlations between inflation and the inflationary cost on energy. So the good news is that energy inflation that hits about 16% like we see here is usually kind of a one-time bump. We're aware of the geopolitical issues that are probably driving that, but they are generally something we see bump and then flatten back out. We don't always see it go back down, but we see it flatten back out. So some things that are impacting our economy directly, the inflation rate is 3.5 year over year for the entire country in June, with the core being at about 3.2, just slightly lower. Colorado's economy is seeing a little bit harder of an impact of inflation. So we see in May it was 5%. I just pulled the numbers for June and it was 3.9. So it has cooled slightly, but we're still seeing it above that benchmark of about 2%. We have seen decline in Erie's building permits. We're down 60% from prior years. And that is a natural cooling, but also we had a lot of permits too. So when you see a huge upswing like that, the come down tends to feel a little heavier than it may be. We are also seeing in the housing market high inventory, longer on the market days. And this is for Colorado as a whole. This is not just our area. This is just something we're seeing in the housing market in general. From consumer spending trends, the top 10% is still bolstering the economy. And so that's important to remember because those are the folks that do have the most cash that is available to be pumped into the economy, therefore really bolstering that remaining 85 to 90% of folks who might be more on a paycheck to paycheck basis. And energy costs do correlate to slowed spending. They have one of the most demonstrable connections to that. So if somebody sees that it's $5 at the gas pump, they're less likely to spend as much at the grocery store, therefore impacting our sales tax. And then, yes?
Just a quick question.
Sure.
In the report, it said that the building permits had fallen over 40%. Did they actually fall 60%?
So it depends. So the permits have gone down 40%. The revenue's gone down 60%. So there's a difference in the metric there, but both are correct. So yes, good catch. And then finally, we've seen some industry specific changes that we are seeing level off. So construction costs, we were seeing a 10% year over year increase. Lead School of Business is reporting that is flattening. That does not necessarily mean that we'll see flattening costs, but we're seeing that some of the impacts of potential tariffs and things like that and all of that that's kind of played out is starting to level off a bit. So that's good news. Hopefully that means that some of our costs begin to compress slightly. And then just to make sure, yes, upfitting vehicles is something that has continuously been rising costs. We are seeing less lead time on how long it takes us to get vehicles, but that upfitting cost in particular for specialized vehicles continues to be a longer lead time and therefore costs a little bit more. And then, of course, the geopolitical climate always impacts our economy. So I'm going to let Cassie talk through our forecast assumptions this year and what we're looking at.
All right, so kind of going through all of this, overall, we are projecting 1% to 2% in revenue, but that is an average of all of our revenues combined. We've got them each by category, and then we kind of project for each one, and then take the total amount and have that plugged in. So it is 1% to 2%, but as you can see, there's all of these different ones feeding in there. And so as I mentioned earlier, sales tax is one of our biggest revenues. It is the biggest for the general fund, and we've seen that flatten quite a bit. And so that's what's feeding these. You see that 2.5% is what we are projecting there. Now we have seen it come up a little bit in the most recent month, so we're waiting to see if that trend continues, and we might be able to raise that a little bit. So it's something we're keeping an eye on going forward.
Yes.
And then down there with the building revenue, you'll see 10% that it's down. That's after adjusting the budget down. So that's, I think I took $2 million out of the budget and then made a drop of 10%. So just to be clear, it's still down 60%. We just made an adjustment for that not to be year over year.
Yeah, so we're being a little more optimistic with that line item in hopes, and that is based on some information that Sarah Nermella's team has given us, developments that we know are kind of in the hopper and moving through. And so we didn't cut it completely. We did compress that one down a little bit. I'll also add that the slight bump we saw this month was attributed to two primary areas. One was vehicle sales tax, which tends to be pretty unpredictable. So that's part of why right now we're kind of waiting another month to see if that trend continues. The other area is internet sales, and that does tend to stay pretty steady. So if we see that trend continue, like Cassie said, we do feel like that could be bumped up a little bit. But this year, we have growth assumptions. We like to throw them in kind of three categories. If we were to keep this a very constrained environment, we would just essentially have a flat revenue across the board. We would just say last year's budget, that's what we're rolling with. We do think that we can confidently say we're somewhat constrained, and we're going to say somewhere between 1% and 2% overall. That said, if we do see sales tax bump slightly, we would feel confident in bringing that number up, which might put us more in the optimistic area. So it's a little bit different than what we've seen in the past, but I do want to reassure everybody this is pretty normal for most organizations. I have had conversations with several of our peers, and they're seeing about the same thing. There's only one that I talked to, and it was a mountain town, and it seems that a lot of the mountain towns in particular who didn't get as much skiing this year saw lots of folks spending in the stores because they couldn't ski. So they saw large bumps, but the folks who didn't have specialized economies like that, we're seeing a lot of what we're seeing.
What's the logic behind other taxes going up higher than sales and property
I'm gonna
tax?
look to you what all was rolled in there, because this is a snapshot, so.
The highway user taxes, motor vehicle. So some of these are a little more volatile because they're the smaller amounts. We've seen the highway user taxes continuing to increase every year for the last several years. And so just trying to align with what we've seen coming in. Same with the road and bridge taxes. And so just kind of aligning the budget to what we've seen continuing to come in. Those aren't following the same trends that we've seen with the other taxes, since those are more of a pass-through revenue that we're getting.
We collect that directly from the state, they send that to us.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's part of why we've started last year kind of doing our assumptions this way, was so that we could aggregate it and really focus on what the trends were for that individual line item or a grouping of line items. And then use the average of all of those to get a better assumption, kind of based on the percentage of which it represented, which is why sales tax would have such a huge impact versus maybe want something like that a little bit smaller, even though it's growing.
I'm just wondering if those are vehicle driven and vehicle sales tax is gonna drop, might those also tail off?
It's possible. We'd have to look at, I think, the correlation between the two. I don't think we've ever looked at those side by side.
I mean, I know vehicle sales tax has kind of gone up and down, and those have continued to grow, but that's the best correlation I've got for you off the top of my head.
Yeah, but we can definitely look into it. And that's a question we can also ask some of our peers as well, if they've seen a correlation, if their vehicle sales drop significantly, if they see less collection in those areas as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so for our forecast assumptions, this will be a bit of a change, and so we're asking for a little bit of feedback from council on this evening. So we have maintained a 5-year balanced operating forecast. Traditionally in October, we have brought that, big forecast, and you see it's green across the way, and then maybe in capital it's a little red in the out years, but for the most part, we've been able to keep it pretty balanced. Balancing 5 years is pretty easy when your revenue growth is exceeding or meeting your expenditure growth. Over the last couple of years, we've seen that kind of curtail a little bit. So we were hoping that we could get some feedback from the council on possibly moving to a 3-year balanced forecast, which I know might feel a little strange given the fact that we've had it balanced that far. GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, who kind of guides our budgeting as well as our audit process, does recommend that financial forecasting for 3 to 5 years has balanced growth for at least 3 years. 5 years is always better, but at least 3. So, balancing beyond 3 years does become a little more challenging when you have flattened revenue. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're kicking the can, but it does mean that when you're looking down those years, you might not see it green immediately, right? It means that you have to continue to have those trade-off conversations throughout the year with each budget process. So, the value in our forecast is to anticipate challenges. I do think a 3-year balanced forecast will still achieve that. It just, again, might not feel as comfortable as when we had 15, 20% year-over-year growth in sales tax. And again, that's just for lack of a better way to say it, that's when the math just doesn't math, right? We have to figure out how to continue and keep things balanced for multiple years. But also recognize that when these type of challenges arise, you might not be able to do it for that long of a time period. I will also just share that anecdotally, our organization is at this time pretty comfortable with 3 years. A lot of our peers are not. They're in budget deficits in the immediate future. So just want to reiterate, I still think we're in a much better position than I've seen some other numbers. But again, it might just feel a
Sarah,
little
if you want to
different.
give a little detail on some of those numbers.
Sure.
She's got some pretty interesting numbers from some.
Yes, now I'm happy to. Some preliminary budgeting numbers that have come out of public meetings that we've seen. Boulder County, as many of you probably know, is seeing an $18.1 million deficit in the first year. They have not yet been able to balance. It's still early. They've got a lot of time. City of Boulder is in an $8 million deficit, last I read, with flat growth. Some of our other municipalities are seeing $2 to $4 million deficits in the immediate future. When we first started, we were only at about a $500,000 deficit, and we were able to close that very quickly with our first round of budget submissions. So, and then begin the process of balancing out 3 years. So I would just like to say we're doing pretty good, and I'm pretty proud of that. So.
Not that I want to say everybody else is doing a bad job.
No, they're not. But it could be harder. It could be
a lot
harder.
worse.
Yes, and I think it's worth saying that it could be harder. All right, I'm gonna let Cassie talk through some of the capital improvements fund. We'll go into this in a lot more detail in October, but what we do want to kind of show you is what we've been doing and what we think we're probably planning to do in the upcoming year.
So I'm not going to go through every project listed here, but mostly we would just want to show the total effect of all of these projects adding up and how that adds pressure to the fund over time, especially with limited funds on what we can transfer from the general fund as we try to balance that over the 3 or 5 years.
So, it's down here.
And so you can see with rollovers and everything approved in the earlier supplementals this year, we have about $25.5 million currently budgeted in the CIF. So this would be, if we spend everything in there, which we wouldn't normally do, 40% of that is currently set for capital maintenance, 59% is newer continuing capital projects, and 1% is capital equipment. The one big caveat with that is $7 million for the mine mitigation is in here. If you take that out of the equation, it's actually 56% for capital maintenance, and then I think 42% for the newer continuing projects, and slightly more for the capital equipment. And so it does shift to over half of it is capital maintenance if we take out that mine mitigation that was funded through the COPs.
And from what we've seen, and I might go back one here, you can kind of see the 2027 forecasted there. You can see that the departments have already done a very good job of shifting to a maintenance mindset for the upcoming year. We've got some pretty large scale capital projects that are in the works, including the PD building, just finished this building. So there's a lot of maintenance focus in the upcoming budget. So I think you'll definitely see that whenever we actually start digging into the projects of what's actually funded in the capital improvements fund. And again, this is just the capital improvements fund, which primarily does fund our streets maintenance, some of our parks maintenance, some of our concrete, some of our energy performance efforts. So there's quite a bit in here, but it does represent a pretty small portion of it. Majority of our capital budget does exist in our utilities funds. Right. So for the CIF forecast, again, these are just kind of numbers to look at. These are not real at the moment. But we do this the same way as we look at our general fund forecast. So when we see that transfer kind of come in there, we account for rollovers. We can really determine what that transfer is going to be once the operating and debt and everything is balanced in the general fund. Some years, that first year was very large, I believe around 24 million was that first year transfer. Now it's normalizing around a more reasonable number. Our transfer last year was 10 million. So again, this is assuming the CIF will spend 100% of the budget. It never does. But this is kind of, I think the big thing we want to show here is that as of right now, the total expenses in the CIF are at $7 million, or get with some change. So that shows, definitely a contraction of how much we are doing in new capital projects and more of that focus on maintenance projects. All right, to get into debt here, the good news on this page is that that number is going down. In terms of our obligations, as we had shared last year, I believe Hilltop came in and we talked a little bit about this through the COP, Certificates of Participation conversation. We are getting ready to make the final payment on the Erie Community Center. So that will finish that off. We'll go from the public safety building paying interest only to the full payment. So we will finish paying the $6.2 million on that. So that will be principal only for the remainder because the interest is paid. That will be paid off in 2033. And then our COPs are not a debt obligation under Tabor. You've heard me say that a lot, but I do like to keep it included in these charts so we can see how that's shifting. So we do treat those as traditional debt. That is not included in our debt to valuation ratio down there, which was 10% last year. Is now down to 7%. We have a very low geo debt ratio. So even if the ballot item were to pass for the ECC in the fall, that would not significantly increase our debt ratio. So, we are in a good shape in terms of our debt as an organization.
Cool. Are we going to have a mortgage burning party for the rest of
I will look to our Director of Parks and Rec to see how he feels about that.
I think we should make a big deal of it.
Yeah, so that will be complete. So yes, and just to kind of share the debt funded projects, the Erie Community Center expansion for something that's possibly coming up. As you guys know, you approved the ballot item language for that possible 501% increase that will be on the ballot in the fall. And that would fund both the debt payment and the geo, or for the geo debt and the operating funds. Still paying on the public safety building, and that is in both the payoff of that principal that's coming up as well as the COPs. The town center mine mitigation is still underway. My understanding is that we're still, the mitigation is project dependent, therefore that money is kind of hanging in the way. So the good news is that because that is a taxable COP, we are not subject to the same IRS deadlines on that. So typically if you have a non-taxable debt obligation, you have 3 years to spend 85% of that. So a delay like this could typically be a pretty big issue. But for us, while we try to figure out what's going on at that property, we've got plenty of time. So that's the good news on that one. And then some other debt projects that are possibly coming forward in the next year. We have the Zone 2 and Zone 3 tanks for the water fund. Todd Fessenden and I are still kind of discussing whether or not these are the right candidates for debt in that fund, given the fact that we've shifted some priorities around with the water treatment plant. But at this point, we do have them budgeted with revenue bonds. So that will be kind of considered in the next year or so, and probably in tandem with the full rate study next year. So what work have we been doing given all of this, all the things that we just shared with you? So we asked the departments to start with a constrained environment. Cassie and I felt pretty strongly from the beginning, kind of looking at some of the trends that we wanted to set up the organization for success, and we would rather add later than have to take away more later. So departmental targets were built out this year. We'd used target-based budgeting for the last 2 years. It's been pretty helpful, I think, to departments to kind of see what they spent last year and add those inflationary and new projects to that budget. We started with a 5% reduction from 2026. Once we got those in, we took a good look, plugged it into the forecast, and did ask for an additional 5% reductions. This might feel counterintuitive, but we ended up with, I think, a total of 8% operating reductions when all was said and done. Some departments had to come in over target simply because of the cost of doing business. So we did that second round to kind of pull that down. So the average of the two requested reductions ended up around 8%.
So does that include FTE reductions?
So at this time, we have not reduced FTEs with the exception of, I believe, 1 or 2 possible vacant positions that we might be pulling out. But no current positions, no positions are even being considered at this time for reductions.
Yeah, if that does come to be and there's even an inkling of a reduction in force, I'm hopeful that you'll bring us into the loop, because.
Yes, if we thought we were at that point.
At all costs.
Yes, if we thought we were at that point, I think we'd probably be talking about it right now for sure.
Yeah, and so the corollary to that is to cut 8% out of your budget, that means project cuts. And so I worry about maintenance, right? And making sure that we're maintaining so we don't have a big payment later because things have deteriorated. Where's David? I think of the roads, right? If you don't maintain them, then you get this bigger issue. And then people get upset because of potholes and all the rest of it.
No, you're actually leading us exactly in the direction I was hoping to go. So no,
yes.
that's perfect.
It's not planned.
Yeah, no, it's great. So that to your point was one of the biggest concerns from the departments. They wanted to make sure that they weren't cutting current projects, that those key areas that are prioritized by the council or that we saw in the couple of community surveys we did last year were not areas that were reduced. So they really focused on those new CIF projects that maybe were in the wings or had been pushed out certain years and maybe weren't ones that we needed to do right now. And kind of focusing on the ones that were already in progress, or in David's case in particular, streets maintenance. We've maintained the funding on that so far. Some of the prioritization areas that we did ask departments to focus on were areas where they had historically lower spending than 90%. So if you were spending 75% of your budget, even if it was $1,000 in that line item, we asked you to cut it back down to somewhere closer to your historical spending. We spent quite a bit of time working through our executive budget team directly with the departments and actually looking line by line at like, hey, over the last 3 years, here's how much you've spent. So
She's not kidding.
Yeah.
Every single line.
yeah, Meredith got a crash course in how detailed Cassie and I can get in the weeds.
$50 gone.
Yeah, and I believe one director said at one point, "Are we really doing 50?" Yeah, I was like, "Yeah, believe it or not, it does add up." And so we did that exercise with every department twice, actually.
I'm watching the faces of all the stories.
I don't think I'm the favorite back there right now, and that's okay. No, in all seriousness, we worked very hard together, and I think got to a pretty good spot. A lot of reductions were in food, travel, branded clothing, things that we've just been able to have kind of freely, and it just being a little bit more strategic about areas that people needed certifications, things like that. I have to compliment very heavily our fleet team. They have been doing a really great review of our vehicle replacement program, finding areas where we need to replace versus where maybe there's some time, looking at different lease agreements to try to save us some money, better lead time so we're getting the vehicles faster. So that has really helped take some pressure off of the fleet transfer that you see in there every year. Any non-critical projects, we're kind of just going to delay and take a beat and look for council's direction on which ones we need to bring back into the fold. And then finally, yes, I already spoke about this, but the limited FTE increases and really focusing on the current staff and those fringe benefits that we already have for them, trying to maintain our market and merit increases at the current levels, just really focusing on those areas rather than adding to the workforce. And so then some other unknown impacts, just there's more to come on this, and this is part of why we don't have full numbers for you today because these can be pretty significant. First and foremost, our medical insurance premiums are still in negotiation with Kaiser. We are expecting an 18 to 22% increase. We are hoping for it to be lower, but until that number comes in, that can be a pretty big balancing act on our forecast.
What's the gross number for that right now?
Around $1 million or more than that.
I think it's $4 million for medical insurance total.
Yeah, we can get that for you. I pulled it up pretty
Sound
quickly.
right?
Does that sound right, HR team? We can probably pull that pretty quickly.
Yeah, so 20% of $4 million.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, yep. And we do currently have cost sharing with employees. So the ratio, I believe, is 85% employer paid. So something to consider too is that some of that cost would get passed off to employees if it did increase, if we kept it at that ratio, which can sometimes for our employees on the lower end of the pay scale, that can actually wipe out sometimes their grade increases. So it's something we're being very mindful of and watching very closely.
Sarah?
Yes.
So we got word late afternoon today on our medical anyway. And it's not final, but we did get it down to at least 12.4. And we're hoping we might be able to get it a little bit lower. We have a couple decisions to make before we know what the final, but that's what we're looking at, much more closer to like a 12.
All right. Alicia gets the glitter cannon for the day. All right.
In fact, we're clapping for a 12.4.
Well, you can see what we've been through, that was our instinct. Well, that's good, it's good news. So that will make, that unknown impact is going the right direction. That's not often that happens, and let alone in real time. So I'm glad to see that. Some ones I know for sure we won't be getting until later this year are property liabilities, workers' comp premiums. The timing of those are often kind of a little funky. We also have supplemental coming up for unbudgeted expenses. Some of the due diligence period items for the Alameda Minerals issue, thank you, for SN Energy and the due diligence period. That one is, we've got some expenses coming in right now. We'll know a little bit more, but that will have to be appropriated. The prior town manager, just like some of those costs associated with that, as well as the recruitment of the new town manager, those are unexpected costs we'll have to appropriate. And then if we do have to host a special election, that will also be an additional cost. And those are just some examples of some of the unknown ones. There are always little tinier ones, but those are at this point the highest dollar ones that I'm aware of at this time. All right, we're getting close here, guys. Some other revenues and sources we've explored this year. David Pasek and I have been exploring for a couple of years now, and we mentioned this last year, a transportation maintenance fee. We do have a study that has just started that is looking at a small fee on each utility bill that supports street repaving and maintenance. This would be a fee. This is not a tax. It would be a set amount. This is something most of our neighboring municipalities do. And I believe last year when we spoke about it, we were expecting it could offset between $1 and $2 million of our street repaving costs, but now we're actually into the study process, so we're hoping to get an idea of what that would look like. So we're hoping to bring that to you later this year to look at, see if it's something that we have an appetite for. And that way that would help us with either a partial or full recovery cost option on streets maintenance. And in particular that repaving, which we've seen the cost just increasing year over year and is a substantial part of our capital improvement fund.
We'll have time to talk about it, but my general feeling is I don't want to go down that path, knowing that we're asking our residents to increase their sales tax by 0.5%. But we'll have to have a conversation and really weigh out the pros and cons. I recognize it's a fee, and I'm guessing because it's a fee, we can just do it.
Yes.
But that has the same feeling as a tax.
Yes.
And so I want to be very cautious about just saying, yeah, let's do this.
Yeah, and that's why we felt it was really important to bring forward a study for you guys to look at, and why we kind of started that conversation earlier last year. Part of where it will have more impact rather than on the residents would actually be commercial, where you see a lot of that impact because of they tend to have more impact on our roads, larger scale vehicles, parking lots. And I will leave the rest of those details to our professionals. Actually, Carson Bice, who you met last week, has taken that contract. So her has been awarded that contract. So he'll have more of that information. And we hope that if nothing more, you have it to consider and look at. Like I said, a lot of our peers do it. It's pretty successful in other towns. And then that way we can kind of weigh if that's something you all want to do.
Yeah, so one thing that came to mind was trash haulers, heavy trucks, several trash haulers that operate in town. Are we able to leverage that type of fee on I don't know what the rules are around that, but are we able to, like through their business license or I don't know?
I was about to say, we're gonna need Mr. Tasek up here.
waiting.
Yeah.
Didn't know I'm coming up. David Pasek, Public Works Director. So yeah, we still have to do the study, but we are including in that study impacts due to industrial uses, commercial uses. We're also looking at institutional uses such as schools, things like that. I've talked with some partners of ours in City of Boulder, Loveland, and there's different approaches that each of them have taken with regard to their fee. But there's pretty uniform consensus that the commercial industrial uses are able to be assessed. The challenging ones are the trash haulers that are not based in the town of Erie. But we do have a landfill based in the town of Erie, which we would be able to assess as well, so.
Okay. And we can look at different options too, where residential is maybe a partial. I believe that we've talked a little bit about where that's like a partial cost recovery, like a much lower fee. There's all kinds of hybrid approaches to it. Boulder, I would say, is an example of one of the most complex ones I've seen. They have like tiered structures and all kinds of things going on inside of theirs. Whereas like I think Loveland's is a little bit more straightforward. It's like a flat fee and it's kind of tiered based on use.
Is it based on your vehicle or is it based on?
Trips generated. So we'll assess, like, there's a certain trip assessment associated with each type of residential unit. So multifamily versus single family housing. And then for commercial, industrial, other types of uses, it's based on their square footage of their use. So we'd be able to apply like a vehicle trip generation based on that square footage that their business does.
I'm not sure I'm quite tracking. So a house, for example.
Yes.
Let's talk about John's house. So
Yeah.
John's house, how do we how do we put a fee on John's house for his trips he's taking?
So we would assess that, we'd assign it a number, we assess four trips. And then we'd break that down of like, okay, that equates to this amount of fee, which we apply to your utility bill.
Okay, it's on the utility bill.
And it's usually a few dollars a month. I've seen them as low as $2, as high as $8 a month, but it's not a significantly high, at least not the ones I've seen in our area are not usually significantly high fees. So we're not talking about it, like I know when I was in North Carolina, we had a $25 a month fee that hit your utility, and that was like the highest you could do. And as soon as everybody was authorized, it was like, put it on the bill. Here where I think we're a little bit more, we have a lot more autonomy to think through what makes sense for the community and what's affordable for our residents.
How do you do like a small business?
So again, that would be what type of use is it? Is it commercial? How many square feet? Assign a certain amount of trips, and then based on their utility bill, we'd assess that fee there as well.
But more than likely, along with that fee being put on the water bill, the trash bill is gonna go up because they're just gonna pass the fee along to the end user anyway. So they'll see an increase in water bill and an increase in.
They very well could. I don't know how the landfill would necessarily pass that along or affect their rates.
They pass it along to the trash haulers pass it along to.
And we could ask our consultant, we could ask
Yeah, we can ask
Carson if he
Carson
could,
about
if he has any information around that, if he's seen that type of like kind of domino effect happen.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, anecdotally probably, but it's really hard to say in practice.
I'd certainly like to see that. I don't love the idea of tacking more fees onto our residents. I mean, what does it look like to look at the budget for, because this is all going for resurfacing of roads.
It would be applied to bridge maintenance, resurfacing of roads, concrete maintenance, restriping efforts, maintenance of future transit stops, a number of different items.
I guess I would like to see, when we get to that point, the budget with the fees, the budget without the fees.
Yeah.
And see
Absolutely.
what does it really mean to our residents, because not only are we talking about this, going back to zone 2 and zone 3 tanks, if we're gonna look at the rates there, we're potentially gonna increase the water rates again for the residents. So I mean, at a certain point, we're making it more unaffordable for our residents to live here.
Well, I will say, just for the revenue bonds on the zone tanks, those bonds are already a part of our current rate structure in anticipation of that. So, we only have had that 4.5% on average rate year-over-year increase, and that will be for these next year as well. But, the rate study has already taken that into account for the current rates, so if that puts your mind at ease at all. It could always change in the next rate study, but yes.
And I don't wanna say that we should put a tax or fee on everything, but part of what Sarah's tasked with doing is maintain a current level of service. And with the inflation and the cost of doing business, we're also just trying to keep up with that.
Sure.
So-
Right. I just wanna, I think every time we look at something like this, in the
does
back
add
of my
up.
mind is how much are we adding to the cost of living here for our residents, our current residents?
And our local businesses are already paying pretty high property taxes
Right.
as well,
That's
so.
true.
That just tacks onto that, which makes their expenses go up, which passes it along.
It passes along to the residents.
The other side of that is though, we have to cut services, then they're gonna complain to you because we've cut their services, so it's a fine line.
I do, you know, I appreciate how the budget's being looked at. When I worked for the city of Longmont, we went through layoffs. Somehow I kept my job, but a number of people didn't, and even departments were closed. So I think is a great approach to trying to make sure that we don't have to go down that path.
Well, yeah, and we want to present you those options, and that's really why we wanted to at least give you the opportunity to look at it, see if it makes sense, see if it is viable for the community. Ultimately, you all can make that decision. So we wanted you to have the information to make that decision, so.
And we have included as part of the scope of work, community engagement through the process. So it's not like we're gonna be just developing this in a vacuum. We're gonna be trying to get input, see what the appetite is, what kind of fee would make sense, if anything at all. So,
Yeah, appreciate that too.
yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely.
So one of the things in looking at revenue being flat with, if consumer confidence is going down, that's obviously affecting in that. So if we run into a blip, coming out of that, what does that do to revenue and how does that affect the other numbers? Because if revenues start trending upward again, one of the things I want to make sure is we're not overreactionary with things that.
Yes.
Because
No.
that's the thing is once you add on fees, it's like you don't really
Yes.
unwind the clock. So, oh yeah.
Yes, no, I agree. I try very hard not to be Chicken Little,
Yeah.
I really do. I tend to err on the side of, I would rather be cautiously optimistic and, us maybe pull back a little bit too much and then I'd be wrong the other way, right?
Yeah,
Like I'd
yeah.
rather us bring more in and then I love to be wrong about that. Because there's some unpredictability right now, just in general in the
Sure.
economy. So you're right, this could be a blip. You look at that energy number, that is unusual, but has that direct correlation to consumer confidence. So that could taper off and we could see us leveling back out. And if that's the case, I think, Cassie and I will have more confidence of that in the next couple of months. And it could be that we come back and say, hey, we really only want to look at a partial, cost recovery model, or we don't actually, it's really necessary this year. Maybe it's something we spend a year doing, work within the community to see if it's something that makes sense. So I think that's really the goal of why we do our revenue assumptions the way we have been, is to have that flexibility as that data comes in.
Sure.
We can react accordingly, but not overreact or underreact because,
Yeah.
like if we see, another month of it moving upward, I'll feel a lot more confident.
Yeah.
I think you will too.
Absolutely.
I know she gets a little more nervous than I do sometimes, I think, so, which is good. That's what she's for, right? Okay, and of course, if we have more questions about that, I'm happy to come back. But I'm gonna shift real quickly into the COP mine mitigation because this one will be a little bit new for everyone. So some of you may know, they did a study in the area that is across the street from the town center area that they were thinking about doing some mitigation underneath the ECC side. And it looked like we didn't actually need the mitigation in order to do that. And I am happy to let Luke speak a little bit to that if you guys want some more details on what exactly is going on at the property.
Yeah.
Why don't you head up here while I prep for you. So, because it's not needed, we had a couple of options.
Can we just pause?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why was it not needed?
Yes, let's let these guys chat.
And I asked that because when we built the rec center, we stopped from going further west because of the undermining.
So when you're talking about doing courts, you're not digging into the ground all that deep, right? You're over excavating 3, 4, 5, 6 feet. And when we found out that the mines in those areas weren't as severe for that type of a structure, that's why you don't need a mitigation. Now, when you're talking about superstructures like a pool, which is extremely heavy, support columns, things like that, that's where you get into the need to mitigate your subsurface. But when you're just going down 3 feet and putting hard quartz on it, there's very, very, very minimal risk.
It's good to know. I thought you were going to tell me we could have built a.
No.
Missed an
I just
opportunity.
appreciate everybody bringing good news to
differential
this thing, right?
settling. It's a weird thing about a solid concrete thing that needs to hold water.
All the water goes out.
Yeah, early this summer, we did some preliminary drilling out there to do assessments on the ECC side as well as the town center side. There's a lot more work to be done, but those initial results were much more favorable than what we had anticipated.
Nice.
And there was also a thorough review of all of the previous work and exploration and drilling that's happened out there. And I don't want to get too far down speculation road, but the initial results were really promising out there. So
Awesome.
for the land use proposed, we think things should be good as they stand.
And so we don't have to go into debt $2 million to mitigate that.
So that's kind of what we're proposing. We are proposing taking that $2 million and rolling it back into the debt payment this year. The other alternative is that we could roll it into a project for that property. But we with some upcoming possible construction on that site, if a renovation or an expansion is approved, that area would actually be used for staging for the construction. So it might not actually be able to be developed for that purpose for a couple of years. So Luke and I talked a little bit about this with town management and kind of felt like it would be best served rolling into the debt payment. And then we could set aside some funding for a feasibility or early kind of design for the purposes that we were looking at for that project.
On a back of napkin, we anticipated adding anywhere from 14 to 16 courts. That complements the existing courts on the site. Again, that was back of napkin. We didn't have any other engineering or design done. So we kind of had this thought of, well, could we go ahead and move into that project? But as we have gone more into the ECC expansion project, like Sarah mentioned, that site's going to be impacted by a laydown yard. If the ECC expansion happens, and we'd just be tying up that debt money for another 2 years.
Yeah, which becomes an arbitrage problem eventually.
Right. So Sarah and I, we talked and said, yeah, we can come back to a future council with that project once we have a little bit more identified costs of what the actual project will be and how much it will actually be between design, engineering, and construction.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to be proposing, but we are certainly open to other options. But it felt like the most prudent thing to do if we don't need to continue the debt or using that money for debt to roll it back into the payment. Yes.
So that would be for 2027, we have like 3 something debt payment on the COP. We would reduce that down to 1 something.
Exactly. Yes, and then we would just utilize that cash back into the payment. Exactly.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
That 2 million could only be used in that area?
So we do have some autonomy with it. The hardest part about it is that it has that 3-year 85% spend requirement because that's on the non-taxable side. So, with the project presumably at the time was more shovel ready, it made perfect sense. With something not as shovel ready, like I said, we get into an arbitrage kind of issue with interest rates not being super high right now, but we do expect them coming up. I would anticipate us making investment earnings on it, and so we might be subject to some repayment on that if we held that for that time period. So.
Yeah.
But since that payment comes out of the general fund, you're basically increasing your availability of funds in the general fund by $2 million.
Yes, that's exactly what you're doing. Yeah, you're freeing up cash because that was initially, available for that purpose. Okay. And then finally, we are looking at what the ECC ballot item, if approved, would look like. So there would be a small dedicated revenue source. We talked about that last week. If that is the case with the debt authorization, that would also be something that you would see fold into the 2027 budget. So just something to be aware of. We kind of mentioned what that might look like in collection-wise if approved last week. All right, so I have said a lot. Cassie said a lot. We've said a lot. So for tonight, what we're really looking for, we've really focused on these core operations and these current service levels. Thank you, guys. You're welcome to stay if you really want to. If you leave, you'll inevitably be called back.
Just a great chance to stretch the legs.
So we're really focusing on those core operations, those current service levels, capital maintenance. We are aware that there's a possible expansion project on the horizon, which could be very large scale for that team. So we just want to make sure that there aren't any key areas that we are not paying attention to, or if you have questions about key areas that you want us to make sure that we, if we have included it, we can let you know. Is there support for that recommended revenue and expenditure assumptions and that long-range forecast? Again, that would be us staying somewhere between 1% and 2% unless we saw a bit of an upswing out of our gully, as well as whether or not a 3-year balanced forecast feels comfortable. And again, we can revisit this at the next study session if we see better numbers. And then, I kind of skipped to myself here. Yeah, any concerns over that 3-year balanced forecast? It sounds like there might be some concerns around the transportation maintenance fee, which we can absolutely continue to bring more information forward once we have that study complete. And then if there's any concerns about this focus on our current service levels and infrastructure. So with that, I will try to stop talking and let you guys kind of mull it over. And like I said, we have everybody here to chat through any questions you may have.
So what's the process if we transfer to a 3-year balanced forecast and then decide later on to go back to a 5-year? How hard is it to make that transition back and forth?
It's not so much a hard transition as it would be an exercise for the department directors to really dig into their budgets to understand what areas they would need to reduce in order to get us balanced in those out years. Because our 2 largest cost drivers in the general fund, well, I should just say the largest cost driver in the general fund is personnel. And that makes perfect sense, right? But that has a fanning effect. And so generally, as we see our people force being, pretty critical to our core services, we would probably have to look at capital budget transfer being reduced, operations budget being reduced. You can certainly do it. It just frankly might be a little painful.
Painful to do the work or painful to see the results?
Probably both.
Both, yeah. I was trying to think of a eloquent way to say that. Yeah, I think both. I think it would be difficult because it would involve us using some balancing strategies that we have not traditionally used, at least not since I've been here or that I can see in prior forecasts.
Yeah, my gut feeling tells me we should still do the 5 years so that we're going through the exercise and we don't get into the mode of kicking the can down the road because we don't know. And then you get these cliffs. And that's typically when rifts have to happen. And I certainly want to do everything we can to support you so we never have to end up in that place. To your point with Longmont, right? They had rifts, right? You made it through. I've made it through all the rifts in my career, but where I work, we just had a rift. We lost people on my team, and it is a painful journey to go through. So I don't know. My gut says, I'm open to further discussion, but that planning, I think, helps us understand what could be on the horizon so we can plan for it.
So, how are we doing with the water investments that are the next 3 years? Is it enough for us to balance, or do we need to go into next 5 years?
Sorry, which?
The water projects that we're looking
The
at.
water projects, so those are primarily contained within the water funds and the utility funds. Those funds are actually quite healthy at the moment. And we are in the middle of like that mini rate study. We have a study session or a presentation next week with NISP and Northern Water, on NISP from Northern Water, to talk through that particular situation. We'll also have a full rate study next year. So, but at this point, and we can certainly show you some of the projections that we have right now next week at the Northern meeting. But my understanding, and I will look to Todd if I'm saying anything incorrectly here, is that fund is okay right now. Like it's generally very healthy, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have transitioned from the water treatment plant project and freed up some of that cash and are now reinvesting that in some water CBT shares, as well as more of the maintenance and like upkeep of some of our existing structures. And so that will all be reflected in the utilities budget. And then again, will be assessed as a part of the rate study, the full rate study next year, even though we're doing like a mini one right now. The full rate study will be next year, which will look at the full impact of that cash flow and the impact on rates.
So you feel like 3 years is good for
For the water, well, I mean, you mean like in general for all of the funds or for the general?
just for this one, because
Yeah.
there is a lot of uncertainty around next few years, right? It's 3, 5, 10.
Yeah, so I feel comfortable in that space because that's usually where I've operated in most organizations. Most organizations stay balanced for about 2 to 3 years. I'm used to deficits in the current year. So I was very surprised when it came to Erie, and I was like, that's a 5-year green forecast. That's pretty impressive. So I'm comfortable with 3 years. And what I can say is it doesn't have to stay 3 years permanently either. What we could do is we could look at it 3 years this year, and then, you know, the departments have made pretty significant cuts up to this point. So I would be a little nervous to ask for additional cuts simply because I think right now we have a good handle on what those impacts will look like. But next year we could look at another iteration of that and right siding again. And so it could be more of an iterative reduction process, and then we could also base that on different revenue projections if we see an upswing. So I wouldn't say I'm comfortable with 3 years, but I can understand why others would not be as comfortable with 3 years.
I'm generally okay with the 3 years, particularly on revenue side of things. You can't really know what's gonna happen 5 years from now. My concern would be in the capital improvements projects and street maintenance, because as we build out further and further from the center of town, street maintenance could catch us unawares. That's a huge one. So those are my two concerns.
I would say that the 8% that have been cut so far, as Sarah noted, has a lot to do with travel training, some of the items that aren't necessarily core service. If we start wanting to balance out to 5 years, correct me if I'm wrong, we're much more likely to have to get into operational cuts for next year.
Yes.
Yeah, this is the dilemma, right? Because if you don't do that and you don't cut sooner, then you have this big cliff, and that's when rifts start to happen. So obviously we don't need to make a decision tonight, but I appreciate you bringing this topic to us so that we can at least chew on it and figure it out on what we need to do.
And something, if you're comfortable too, and I know it's just more work for you, you'll be fine, but in October, we could probably bring back to like, this is what 3 years looks like, this is what 5 years looks like, and this is what we have to cut to make it work.
Yes, we can absolutely do that. And you can also see how much of a cliff year 4 is too. Because what we are finding is that it's not a cliff, it's a little leap right now, you know, but to your point, if costs inflate, if we see revenue compress, it could become a cliff, you know, sooner than later. So yeah, fiscal cliffs are always, they make me nervous. But we could bring those options, and that would be an exercise in what are the trade-offs if we go to that far out of a forecast.
Because the other way to look at this is that we're actually borrowing from years 4 and 5, but we don't know we're borrowing from years 4 or 5 until we get there, and then you have that.
And part of our cuts in the current year are actually balancing those years forward. So, you know, that's part of what we're bumping up against too, right?
You realize the cuts are permanent?
Yes, the cuts are permanent, yes.
Yes,
Yes, the cuts are permanent.
And part of the reason that we're thinking the 3 years instead of the 5 years is because we are putting the revenue so low, 1% to 2%, which is less than half of inflation right now, which is unusual, especially with sales tax being such a driver for us. And so the idea is that that would at least come up and at least match inflation after a couple of years where we've had it down some. And so that's the idea with it. We would project it out at what we're continuing with. You'd see the cliff in the 4th year. And the idea is that hopefully sales tax and stuff would come up to match those rising costs a bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, and I can't remember what year, it was either 23 or 24, but we kind of had as we had obviously population growth, we had kind of a big bump in staff during some of those years. We're obviously trying to run lean now. One of the my organization tends to run pretty lean. One of the things that we do is when if there's an open rec through just natural attrition and things like that, we, like usually the department manager has to have justification for refilling that, otherwise the rec goes away. I know that's kind of a, I don't want anyone freaking out about, oh, I'm not gonna be able to have enough people for my department, but I think it's something would be good to think about, because that does prevent risks from happening if you know, and there are positions where it's like, you know, yeah, we have to have this person here because, you know, they're a core part of the business and things like that. But I think that evaluation piece is important, because if you can, you know, I mean, we just, in the report, we just asked everyone to cut 10% out of their budget. So, you know, doing that on the fly, but being proactive about it, then when you get to that point, maybe you're not having to make, you know, those drastic cuts kind of last minute, but just something to think about. So.
Yeah, I will say that that's actually something that HR, Alicia is on our executive budget team, and so it gives us input in those areas. And that was an area of, let's assess these as they come up and ensure that it is something that really truly needs to be filled, or if it's you know, maybe something that's phasing out, we're no longer doing that program, just like assessing. Doing those assessments, I think, is probably a very critical piece, so it's definitely on our minds.
Sure, right.
Become a part of the conversation.
So we have 8% roughly reduction. This is showing 1% to 2% growth. So part of that is salary increases, healthcare increases. It eats up that 8% savings. I just want to make sure I understand that.
Yes, it's that, as well as just some of the cost of doing business. A lot of our software contracts, outsourcing, consulting, all of these things that we rely on other entities to do, have contractual increases of sometimes 3, 5, or 10% year over year. So we have been working very hard to keep those contract terms shorter so that we can renegotiate, go out for RFP, make sure we're getting the best price on those. But that is a component of this too. Those are in some cases exceeding inflationary cost. Well, we say inflation is 2%. It's probably more like 3% now, right? But it's exceeding what we would traditionally say in inflationary increases.
Yeah, okay, and then just like last year, whatever you guys decide with the salary increases, just please go out to surrounding communities so we're not an outlier.
Yes, I actually have that information for you. And I can't share it at an aggregate level because everybody's still negotiating it. But we're seeing between 4 and 5% across the board for most municipalities. And that is market and either merit or anniversary increases. So that's a combination of, you know, 2 different, like 2 and 2 or 2 and 3. Only one municipality in the area has shared that they're exceeding that at 6%.
I believe that one
So
municipality is trying to make up for the fact they're now going to split out the cost, share the cost of insurance with their employees, which they haven't been doing.
So they're trying to buffer that. Yeah.
So just be careful. State of Colorado, if you're a classified employee, got 0% this year. I work in mines, it was 3%.
Yeah.
For up to a certain salary level, and above that salary, it was 0%.
Yeah.
I would look at CU, I'd look at St. Vrain. You know, it's, I don't want to, you know, stifle the growth of salary in this town, but if we are inflating our salaries at a rate faster than inflation, our neighboring municipalities, our neighboring government entities, it makes us look like we're not doing due diligence. I'm not saying 4 to 5% is that, I'm just asking you to make sure you're doing due diligence.
And we do try to benchmark, we certainly look at everybody, but we do try to benchmark with folks who have revenue sources similar in nature to ours. Some of the counties and stuff that are actually, reducing staff, they're reliant pretty solely on state, federal, and property tax. They don't have sales tax coming in necessarily at the same rate. So we do try to benchmark that too, and align ourselves with similar revenue sources because generally they're seeing the same trends or similar trends to what we're seeing. But we can certainly look at all of those and just kind of see what it looks like. We also rely very heavily on Graves Consulting to do a yearly review of where our staff is at. And so that's also a big component of this. The number is grounded in benchmarking of our neighboring municipalities, so that's really important too. I believe Lori Graves came and spoke to you all last year about kind of her methodology too, and we do utilize her for that.
Other thoughts? Yes, are there projects, priorities or projects that we'd like to see? I've got my long list, you ready? I'd love to see murals on the rec center. I recognize the rec center is gonna be hopefully remodeled. But on the Erie Parkway side, there's these two beautiful empty walls. They've been empty for 20 years. And I know it's somewhere in the plan. I'm looking at Luke, but I don't know when it is. I just think of a mining mural out there or something else that represents Erie out there. I think would really start to pop and bring culture into that area. Branding consolidation, I know that Gabby's working on that in the fourth quarter. I don't know if there's any cost to it, but at least if there is, that's considered. Erie Parkway signage on 287. Want to make sure that, we don't get into a situation where the county approved that and then we're like, oh yeah, we have no money to do that. It's not very long, and I would like to see that done. Unleaded fuel at the airport, I know that's the enterprise fund, but we've spoken a lot about two challenges at the airport. One is noise and the other is leaded fuel. And I'm not quite sure where that's on the horizon, but can we accelerate that? I think it was Longmont or Boulder, I forgot, one of them just did that.
I knew we'd have to call David back. David, I think, can very quickly address that because I do think that is a part of our budget this year, correct?
The unleaded fuel?
Yeah.
Yes, we do have that programmed for a CIP out at the airport for 2027.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good.
Check.
Is that a fuel systems upgrade
Yes.
for 450?
Um,
I was curious if that was what that was.
Not on the CIF fund, it's in the airport
Okay.
capital fund.
Okay.
But we'll have that funded 90% by CDOA, if we get the grant, which we're gonna strongly pursue. But that's one of the reasons why we pushed it up to next year, is because we anticipate that CDOA will start removing some of the grant funding opportunities to help assist with the unleaded fuel tank additions. So Jason and I spoke and we're gonna move it up to next year. So,
Awesome.
What is CDOA again?
Colorado Department of Aeronautics.
And the fuel system upgrades you're seeing on the CIF, I believe, are for our fuel systems for the fleet. Yeah.
I've got the correction of the signal arm length at 111th Arapahoe. Hopefully the arms that you got off the other road work, but if that doesn't work, I certainly want that to continue to be discussed and hopefully in the budget to fix that. Cybersecurity vulnerability mitigation. I know we've got an exec session on this one. We don't want to talk about our vulnerabilities in public, so we'll learn a lot more in a couple weeks here from Denise. What's that?
There are none.
That's right. And we need to mitigate all those we don't have. So just making sure that we're doing the right investments, and maybe we're doing all the investments, and maybe Denise is one of those departments that's underspending dramatically, and so we're cool.
Oh, she came in over. Machine broke.
Yeah, okay, I know the
She had to buy a lot of hardware.
But she had full permission to do so.
Right,
there
there's
might be
certain things
supplemental.
that,
That's right.
you know, the odds of getting hacked are relatively small, but the consequences of getting hacked are extremely huge.
Yes,
And so,
I've unfortunately been through it and it's not fun, so.
yeah. I put on here the overpass Road 5 by the high school. I mean, I know that's out there, but if St. Vrain is really willing to partner with us, is that something that we have a little bit of money to do a study to, you know, I don't know, but it'd be nice to have that in our back pocket as we're just talking with them to be a good partner. What happens there? And then I would still love to find a way to do County Line Road to Highway 7. I know you had sent some correcting information after our last study session. David's going to be at my meeting with Meredith this week, and we're just going to talk about, does it make sense to talk about that again or not? I know it's a huge expense. Obviously, the solution we saw probably isn't viable, but is there a different way? I don't know. So I think that exhausts my list for the moment.
I don't have as long of a list, but a couple things that I wanted to bring up was the compass to Meadowlark School. We've got the 0.3 mile that's needed to connect that community to their school. It's 500 homes. They've been waiting, you know, it's 10 years, that development started 10 years ago. So I'd really like to see that in the budget. I know it's only part of a bigger plan, but we started off the meeting talking about kids getting to school safely, and I don't know how this hasn't happened 10 years ago, but I think it's something that we can fix, and I think we should. We've met, you know, with not only with staff to talk about it, but we've met with Aaron Harbor, who we're required to go across his land. He was more than happy to work with us on that, even giving concessions of delayed payments and whatnot to make that happen. So, because he's, you know, doesn't want to be the barrier between kids getting to school safely. So, so that, and then the Compass Morgan Hill Parks. I know phase 1's in the plan.
Those ones are budgeted at this time, so.
And then 111 flooding issues. I know Mile High, we're working with Mile High to work on that. Just want to make sure that we're looking at the future of when, Lafayette's working on putting in a retail housing development on the west side of 287. If that water flows down 111, it adds to what's already coming down. Plus, if there's ever any development on 111 in Arapahoe in that, southwest corner, that will add to it. So I want to make sure that, when we're doing those studies, that we're looking at all of that. Those are the big ones on my list. So thank you.
Any other additions? Let's go to Neil first, then we'll come right to you.
I was looking at the affordable housing projects, and since Page Property was reconsidered. So I see this amount 1.355 in 26 budget.
Yes.
And what was that used for?
So I'm actually gonna look to Sarah Nermella on that one and kind of what we have budgeted in that area, but I believe that is just earmarked funding for the affordable housing if we were to pursue anything like that. So I don't think that's earmarked for a specific project, but Sarah, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong on that one.
Well, so Sarah Nermella, Planning and Development Director. We don't have specific project-based funding that's earmarked for next year, but we are required to actually create a housing action plan by the end of next year. So we do have budget that is associated with updating our housing needs assessment because the numbers are from kind of late 2022. So we need to update that. And then with those numbers, we'll come up with a housing action plan and figure out what we can and want to achieve over the next many years. And I would say also we'll have a opportunity to touch on the Prop 123 commitment later this fall. I think we're coming back in September or October. And so while we won't have a robust housing action plan to figure out what we'll do with Prop 123, at least we'll have that discussion and be ready once we have go through the process of planning for housing.
So the 1.355 is not used this year, but it's accounted for something.
It'll roll over. We typically just roll it. I think last year there was
Where did that money come from?
450,000 came from the affordable housing impact fee or something like that.
So we had,
Yes.
with the Metro District update for Canyon Creek. So we do have those dollars, but we don't have it necessarily assigned to any particular project. There is a site in Old Town which is owned by Brothers Redevelopment. They have shown interest in the past of potentially expanding on the Vic Smith site that they have, but they haven't really moved it forward. So that's why we have some funds that were set aside originally. That was the remainder of the dollars that we had assumed they might need. And we had set that aside, a couple of years ago and have rolled it over because they just were not capable of doing the project. They had other priorities, so, yeah.
So if a project comes up, are you saying we have 1.355 ready to spend?
Yeah, we do have funds, I should say. So we just didn't have a project assigned to it yet.
And the second one I had was like some of the residents from Campus were requesting for a bus stop or extension of the bus that goes to Boulder somewhere
The
near.
jump route?
Yeah.
So the jump route is getting additional stops and realignment. I don't remember, I can have that included in the Friday update of what that planned reroute and additional stops are.
That I think right now we'll take it further away from them, because I think the reroute is down 111 and then up Erie Parkway.
So are all the bus stops that we're adding to that, are they in this year's budget?
There are a number that are in this year's budget in the Old Town and Collier's URA areas, and then we do have funding for the majority of them along the rest of the route. I do believe we're actually asking for a little bit more funding to make sure that we have enough total funds to do all of the project.
Because they all have to be done before they'll switch the route.
Correct.
Guess that makes sense. You gotta have a place to stand.
Was there one included near the Compass? Because we were also advocating with RTD to extend, I forget the name of that route that comes, it's a north-south route that comes out of Lafayette.
I'll have to look into that. I know which route you're talking about. I just can't remember if that was something that RTD agreed to at this time.
I'm sure they have in it.
So
When you look at their
Pretty much they're cutting.
optimization plan, yeah. But I thought there was, I know there's one on the boulevard through Parkdale, is it Parkdale Boulevard?
Coal Creek.
Coal Creek Boulevard. And I thought there was one by Compass, but maybe not.
I'll look into that. I will get you an update in the Friday report.
Another one was noise by the airplanes. So, is there an ordinance that we can enforce or?
I
think that's a question for Brandon.
Yeah, the air travel is regulated by the FAA. We don't have any enforcement action against airplanes operating in approved airspace. So, no, we wouldn't be able to pass an ordinance that would be enforceable, to my knowledge.
Co-signed, yes.
Yeah, but yeah, I think this is gonna be the next blog, is about the airport. And just get it out there, cause I think, right, we are all frustrated by it and there's nothing we can really do. The unleaded fuel though, I think is at least a tangible thing to get us heading in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think that when we're talking about budgets, what I'm hearing around the table really is a work plan discussion. So I didn't come prepared to address shifting work plan next year, but when we talk about the airport, I think people are so tired of hearing there's nothing we can do. And I mean Erie residents and Lafayette residents and Superior residents and
Longmont residents,
all
Boulder
everybody.
residents.
So I think what we, as far as priorities and living our values, when budgets are, you know, a moral document, and we should be representing our constituents on both sides. And I've been at the tables with Air Park residents in my district and also impacted residents not in my district. I think we need to be at the table together. I think that, you know, that our policy and our planning can reflect that we are looking for a way to work together and find something that works for everybody. So I think that should be included in our plans for next year. And I know that the airport was supposed to be part of our work plan for this year and everything got kind of shifted and moved around, but certainly there should be something that we can do for our residents, a way to come together and have meaningful dialogue around it. And
There's
just
that elusive answer out there. I can't wait till we get to the world of electric planes, and they're coming.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, because they're quiet. And we're gonna have, not too far in the future, taxis that look like drones. I think about my commute to Golden. I'll just sprint down to the Erie airport and jump on, and I don't know where they'll drop me off, but you know, that is the future, right? It's gonna happen.
Be worried if they hand you a parachute.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we're out.
We'll drop you right over mines.
So some residents even know which planes make noise, that red one with the stripe. And they're like, it did 5 times today.
Yeah, and so, could we create an incentive program so if you have the noisy airplane, it's kind of like the junker cars, right? Way back when, the government was paying to get the junker cars off the road to get the emissions down. Could we get the noisy airplanes out of the sky with an incentive?
It was cash for clunkers.
Yeah, cash for clunkers, right? You're in California then, right?
To your
Yeah.
point on the work plan, when the budget comes back in October, we're also gonna schedule some time to talk about the beginning of the 2027 work plan. So that we'd like to align how much funding there is and the timing of the 2027 with the 2027 work plan. So there will be a conversation about that in October.
Okay, great. My only other item was that in the HUTF funds, the projections for that, I was in a federal update and I think it was Northwest Mayors and Commissioners. And the House has passed the reauthorization bill for the highway reauthorization bill. But the Senate has not. It expires on September 30th. They think they'll get a continuing resolution. But one of the things that they're really hotly debating is the HUTF and how that'll be appropriated. So I just wanted to mention that because
That's good information, thank you.
that was a little stunning for some of us at the table to think about that, so.
Because we have seen that come down a little bit slightly, haven't we?
No, it's been raising.
It's been raising? Oh, it's
Yeah.
going the other direction, yeah. I'm
So that-
mixing it up with something else though.
There's potentially changes there, so,
Good to know.
No, that's good to know.
and potentially nothing will change.
It's in that bill too.
So I had two.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I had two thoughts on this, on the CIF fund. For the Page property, is the house being maintained? And is that what's, just because we don't know what it's gonna be used for? Is it being maintained at all?
doing anything with it.
We're storing equipment in the warehouse and the house is just getting basic check-in maintenance.
Okay, at least something.
I wouldn't even call it maintenance, it's basically checking in to make sure nobody's living in it.
It's probably good.
We do have money to do studies on the property for next year though.
Okay. And regarding the affordable housing projects, can that, since it's been rolled over for a number of years, could we use it towards stipends? And that doesn't have to be answered now,
Yeah.
but just,
No, come on up, Sarah. I think she can speak broadly to it. I know stipends have come up in the past, and so Sarah usually has some historical information.
Yes, so we have done some analysis of stipends. I'm trying to recall now if that was one of the memos that we sent on to council, and if not, we can resend it. But that would come up in the process for the housing action plan. We'll be able to tackle what do we want to do with the dollars, what's the best use of funds. So, yeah, I think the conversation will be had pretty healthily at the, well, probably, once we get somebody on board, spring next year.
okay. If we're gonna keep rolling it, maybe we could use it.
Right, we want to use it.
We wanna use it, yeah.
It'd be fun.
Thank you.
So I have one, and can anybody guess what I'm gonna say? I've only been harping on it for six.
The entrance to the
Thank you.
landfill.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we started out hearing about the problems on County Road 5. It's only getting worse. And there's some commercial going in Erie Highlands. There's a new gas station there. It's only got a right in, right out access out of there. There'll be a McDonald's there and a number of other things, Chipotle Medical Center, as well as all the houses going into Westerly, and Sunset. So we gotta move that thing. I mean, there was a agreement that came about in 2018 and, you know, fell through for various reasons. It took a lot to get them back to the table. We had a task force that, you know, David helped lead for, you know, gosh, that was that run like a year or so.
Oh, yeah, geez. Yeah, late 2024.
Yeah, so, you know, I'm saying this now because, you know, I'm term limited here, so I have a vested stake in seeing that move there. We've had a number of trash trucks that have spontaneously caught on fire. There was somebody that had to be airlifted. I think that crash was off 7 in Erie Parkway. But it's dangerous, and you know, we're just getting more density here. So I would personally like to see that be the number one priority in 2027. But
What happened to it? I guess, you know, I'd heard about it, and
Yeah.
I'm aware of it.
I can speak to it.
Yeah.
Feeding on the landfill.
We have a pre-application in from Waste Connections about a variety of changes at the landfill, reflective of the task force. Part of that is also annexation and cleaning up the several decades of layered zoning that occurred out there, to put one PD overlay over the entire property. It's a complicated project, and it's a massive application.
When did they put in the pre-app, David?
Sarah, do you know when that went in? I don't, it's
like-
been.
It underscores how closely we all have to work together to make things
I
happen.
know, the runway, and it just went
Yeah.
Oh, wait, the annexation, the
Yeah,
submittal for it, I
Yeah.
don't have the date.
like a year ago, like 4 years ago, like.
The pre-app happened within the last year.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
okay.
very recent that they've come to us to want to actually execute this. And we are working with them on a PD, a plan development, so that, because their existing documentation is light, should we say, so we're
For the scale of the project.
yeah, so we're trying to get something that's cohesive and that shows all of the elements that could happen, you know, relocation of water tanks, landfill and all that, so.
Land exchange, move the maintenance yard from South County line up to on the facility. Essentially, it's gonna be a long project. We are very much working on it. Chris LaRue, senior planner, and I meet with Waste Connections folks about twice a month to keep this thing on the rails and keep it moving forward. I also want this done sooner, but I'd rather it get done.
Yeah, it gets done right, yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, I'm happy to provide updates on that process. It's been slow. There's been a lot of resubmittals and a lot of what appear on the surface to be minor changes that then have cascading effects down their whole project. So hopefully we'll know more soon and have their actual like final submittal, and then we can start working through. We're working through comments, preliminary comments now. Once we have the actual application in front of us, then comes the nuts and the bolts to get that worked through. Parallel to that effort, obviously, this is all sort of contingent on expanding their operations. And so that is a separate permitting through the state, CDPH&E, Solid Waste Division. So they're also working through that. So that all needs to come together for this whole project to move forward. So slow progress is still progress.
Okay, yep. I don't have any other priorities, but just two things I'll mention quick is one, I just ask of staff that if there's grants we can go after for something that's already funded, that makes sense or whatever, but like, let's not chase grants where we have to put in new matching money, at least for the foreseeable future, just to, keep that. But if obviously, if there's something we're already pursuing, the water tanks, whatever, let's go get that, because that'll help reduce our budget, so.
Unless the match is pretty favorable.
Yeah.
I mean, if we only have to put 10% in and we're receiving 90%.
What, 10% of what?
Like
Or
the airport.
the airport,
Project cost.
the airport
Okay,
unleaded fuel changeover.
but that's in the budget.
Yeah, but I'm saying like if
Yeah,
they pursue grants where
Yeah,
an outside organization is doing 90% of the funding and we only have to come up with 10%, that's probably worth looking at.
Well, that's what I'm saying, I mean, 10% of what? Yeah, yes, you're right, but if it's like, if 10% is $5 million.
Well, the good news is that any
Yeah.
appropriation like that would need to come to council
Yeah,
to
okay, yeah.
approve them. So you would absolutely.
That's true, okay.
You would absolutely see something like that before it went forward.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, and then just on the airport real quick, I definitely hear what you're saying there. What I think, especially looking what's happened recently in Boulder and Longmont, and there's been some, judicial review over some of that stuff. One of the things I know Jason is working on right now, and it's a thing that we know what the problem is. It's the flight schools. It's Rocky Mountain Airport, and Rocky Mountain Airport, because they have a control tower, they can wave off landings. The next closest place they come to is Erie, and that's why you get that. The touch and goes, it's part of flight training, and you have to do that recertification, I think, every year to maintain your flight status. So it's a problem, but one of the things Jason's been doing is he's working with all the regional airports. They're trying to get the flight schools to redirect stuff, and I can't remember what it is. There's an airstrip to the east of us, and they're trying to say, hey guys, let's be good neighbors. Let's try to go out here rather than a place where there's 40,000 people, or in Longmont, 80,000 people. So they're trying to get it to where they work those things out. They're coming here because it's convenient, and yeah. So I think there's a solution. I agree. Yeah, let's get everybody to sit down at the table. And I know Jason's. I think he's tried to lead some of those efforts, but maybe it's something that could be like a town hall type thing or something. So
I'll start thinking about it to write about it, and if I write about it, then it makes me think about it, and Cash for clunkers, there's something there. There's something there. I have one other one, and that's the Erie B, which seems to be getting good traction. And I think we had a 2-year grant, if I remember right. 3-year grant. Okay, so good, we've got at least a couple of years to understand this, but there's a reason for a 5-year plan, right? Because there is a 3-year cliff that we're gonna have to figure out.
RTD did also award us an additional grant we found out about today, for additional service for the Erie.
You guys just are bringing all.
To expand it?
Oh, good.
To-
In operation, yeah.
And continue,
And
right?
continue, yeah.
How much did you say it was for?
The total number is like 645, that's with the grant money, so our match is just a portion of that, it's like 200,000.
640,000 additional dollars?
Yeah.
That should
Okay,
get
so
us
that's
there.
awesome, good job.
I think we just got the Erie B to 4 or 5 years.
And the bigger that number gets, right, we're gonna have to deal with, how do we fund it when they drop it off?
Longmont, Ride Longmont charges $2 for riders and $1 to students and seniors and, I think it was disabled.
They do. They have a very, very small fee structure. It's only a partial cost recovery, but my understanding is it does quite well.
Do you-
I've used Longmont rides, so.
Do you have a sense of like how much of that Ride Longmont budget is covered by that rider fee?
No, but we can certainly reach out to them and see what they'd be willing to share with us. I think that those type of programs are becoming more prominent, and I get the feeling they'd probably be very happy to share that information with us, because everybody kind of wants to do it right now. It's
Well,
great.
I'd be interested to see, I mean, does it make sense to
Yeah,
charge this
definitely.
fee, or is it really doesn't add up to
Yeah.
that much and it's not worth charging it?
Yeah, I think it's a great thing, and then do you try to implement it before we actually lose all the money? So you condition riders that this is where we're headed. But anyway, obviously not for this next year with
Yeah, but
all
we
of
can look into
the
it.
money coming in, however.
Just long-term thinking.
Yeah, exactly. All right, yeah.
I have one last.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
wanna make sure Dan doesn't have it.
Oh, yeah.
So, David, so for closing the legacy wells, do we have to budget anything or how do we?
No, we shouldn't, the town shouldn't incur any costs for closing the wells because the operator is responsible for doing that. We do have budgeted, we hope to recoup most of the costs of our inspection program for active facilities through registration fees that we want to implement in 2027. Probably on the order of like $160,000 a year, we should be able to get back from operators. And with that, we're gonna try to get a pilot program going later this year to look at already closed, plugged and abandoned wells. What it will take to get all of those scheduled to investigate, make sure there's not leaking in the subsurface. Again, we're gonna start with a small scale pilot program. Learn a few things the hard way probably before we ramp it up. Because that's the responsible way to launch something like this, but hopefully we'll be able to inspect everything within, I don't know, I'm gonna be really conservative and say on like a 5-year timeline.
So will that budget be for checking any contamination or?
Yes, so contamination at sites as they get closed, that's handled through the state. And so there's no need for us to budget those things. We inspect active existing facilities, address any ongoing leaks, and those sorts of concerns. Generally, contamination is gonna be dealt with at decommissioning, because it's pretty hard to do that sort of excavation at an active facility. Though in some cases that becomes necessary if things are that bad. With the already decommissioned wells, typically what you would see is just gas release, methane primarily, like natural gas in the subsurface. So that would indicate that there is some problem with the well that could of course get worse. We have seen cases not in Erie, but in the state of Colorado where old plugged and abandoned wells fail completely and you do actually have a bubble in crude. That's the situation we desperately want to avoid, and so we want to get out ahead of that by looking for soil vapor gases to identify any minor problems and then work with the operator if they still exist, or the state of Colorado if they don't, to get those wells reopened and replugged and then put back to bed. This is sort of in Erie, it's an addressable situation, I feel. But I worry statewide. We've got, Emily, what is it, 12,000 plugged and abandoned wells? I don't know who or when those will get inspected, but we'll at least take care of our backyard.
So in the soil contamination, that, like you say, that typically doesn't get inspected or checked until they go to plug it, right? So
Yeah, a lot of that staining is gonna be either in, like, under a tank.
right,
So until you remove the tank, you're not gonna know it's there.
kind of like the one by my house.
Yeah, once they start digging everything up and then they start chasing it, hole gets bigger. But all of those remediation projects are at the state of Colorado level, so
They're very methodical from what I can tell with the communications that come out.
yes, it is I think it's called an iterative process. In the case of the Arapahoe excavation, we've been pushing really hard, both at the state and with the operator it's been going on long enough, over excavate it. I know you don't want to incur additional costs by over excavating clean materials, but at this point, the dig a couple feet, test, months go by, dig a couple more feet. It's gone on long enough.
Yeah, they were out there yesterday, so.
They are partially backfilling the portion of the excavation that is clean and looking at the other side. I think we'll have an update this week or next on where that's going.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, I'm gonna kind of wrap it up. We've got a lot of staff here tonight that I'm sure would like to get out of here. So the time is 8:06 and we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.